At my daughter's wedding, my son-in-law demanded I hand over the keys to my ranch in front of 200 people. When I refused, he slapped me so hard I almost hit the floor. I stumbled out of the hall and dialed a number. He went crazy when he saw who I called. I'm glad you're here. Stick with me to the end of this story, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I never imagined my daughter's wedding day would end with me bleeding on the reception hall's marble floor. But that's exactly what happened when Alan showed his true colors in front of all the guests. The day had started like any father's dream. Avery looked radiant in the antique lace dress that belonged to her grandmother, the same one my late wife, Mariana, wore 32 years ago. I walked her down the aisle at St. Michael's Church, tears welling up as she squeezed my arm, whispering how she wished her mom could see her. For a moment, everything felt perfect. For a moment, I forgot the growing uneasiness Alan had been causing me for months. The ceremony was beautiful. Avery was glowing with happiness, and I forced myself to smile every time Alan looked my way. He had that rehearsed charm that fooled everyone, except those who looked close enough. I had learned to look closely over the last 2 years, ever since he started asking very specific questions about the ranch lands, my will, and what would happen to the property when I was gone. But weddings bring out the true nature of people, and Alan's mask began to slip during the cocktail hour. I was near the bar, a whiskey in hand, watching Avery laugh with her college friends when Alan came up beside me. His bow tie was loose, his face flushed from champagne, and his eyes looked different. Harder, Richard, he said, clapping me on the shoulder with more force than necessary. We need to talk. I turned to face him, noticing how some conversations around us quieted down. What is it, son? The word son seemed to annoy him. He clenched his jaw before forcing another smile. About the ranch, about Avery's future. Our future. This isn't the time or the place, Alan. I lowered my voice, trying to de-escalate whatever was brewing. It's your wedding day. Enjoy it. But Alan had other plans. He moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than a shout. Actually, it's the perfect time. With all these witnesses present, all these important people from both families. A chill ran down my spine. The way he said witnesses turned my stomach. I looked around and realized we were surrounded by his business partners, his relatives, people I barely knew. Avery was still across the room, laughing, suspecting nothing of what was about to happen. Alan, whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking, he interrupted, raising his voice just enough for others to hear, that it's time to show some generosity, to provide real family support. That's when I saw it. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. For a second I thought it was another wedding gift, but when he opened it my blood ran cold. Inside was a set of keys, my keys, the keys to the ranch house, the barn, the tool shed, keys I definitely had not given him. How did you get those? I asked, my voice barely steady. Alan's smile turned predatory. Avery made copies. She thought it would be a nice surprise, a symbolic gesture. He held the box higher, making sure the people around us could see. But I think we need the originals, don't you? Along with the property transfer papers. The whiskey glass trembled in my hand from rage. The what? Come on, Richard, don't play dumb. His voice was so loud now that all conversation around us stopped completely. Avery is your only daughter. The ranch should be hers. It should be ours. And frankly, a man your age shouldn't be carrying such a responsibility alone. I felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on us. The music had stopped. Even the waiters paused. Alan had planned it all perfectly, creating a public scene where any refusal on my part would make me look selfish, irrational. The ranch isn't going anywhere, I said carefully, and this is not a conversation for when? When you're dead? Alan's mask fell completely. Avery deserves security now. We both deserve it. And that ranch is just sitting there, wasted on an old man who can barely manage it. The insult was like a physical blow. Several guests gasped. I saw Avery's Aunt Martha put a hand to her mouth, horrified. Across the room, I saw Avery had finally noticed the commotion and was walking over, her dress flowing behind her, her face filled with confusion. I said, "No, Alan. My voice was firmer than I felt, and I mean it. It was in that instant that everything changed. Alan's face twisted in fury, all pretense of courtesy gone. He took a step toward me, his breath hot with champagne and rage. "You stupid, stubborn old man. Do you have any idea who you're messing with?" Before I could answer, before I could step back, before anyone could intervene, Alan's hand cracked across my face. The slap echoed through the reception hall like a gunshot. The blow was so strong it knocked me off balance. My left foot slipped on the polished marble, and I went down hard, hitting my hip first, then my shoulder. Intense pain shot through my body as I lay there, stunned, the taste of blood filling my mouth where I'd bitten my tongue. For a moment there was absolute silence. Then the murmurs started, rising like a wave. "He hit him. My God, did you see that? Someone call security!" I pushed myself up onto an elbow, looking at the shocked faces around me. Alan stood over me, breathing heavily, his fists still clenched. His expression was one of bewilderment, as if he couldn't believe what he'd just done. Then I saw her. Avery was at the edge of the crowd, her hands covering her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. But she wasn't moving. She wasn't coming to help her father, who had just been assaulted at her wedding. She was looking at Alan, with a mixture that looked like fear. In that moment I knew. This wasn't the first time she had seen this side of him. With effort and pain I got to my feet. My hip was screaming, and I could feel a bruise already swelling on my cheekbone. But I stood tall. I looked him straight in the eye, and then I scanned the crowd of guests, many of whom I had known for decades. "I believe," I said, my voice quiet but clear in the silent room, "that this reception is over." I turned and walked toward the exit, every step sending a jolt of pain up my leg. Behind me, I heard Alan's voice, high-pitched now, desperate. "Richard, wait. I didn't mean it. We can fix this." I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just walked out of the reception hall, out of the hotel, and to the parking garage where my truck was waiting. Once inside the cab, I pulled out my phone. My hands were still shaking, but I managed to find the contact I was looking for. It rang once, twice, and then a familiar voice answered. "Richard? How was the wedding?" I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of what I was about to unleash. "Robert, I need you in Dallas tonight. It's time." There was a pause. "Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back." I looked back at the hotel, where shadows were still moving behind the lit windows of the ballroom. Somewhere in there, my daughter was probably crying. Somewhere in there, Alan was probably trying to justify what happened. And in that same place, the life I had built for the last 25 years was falling apart. "I'm sure," I replied. "It's time everyone knew the truth about the ranch." As I drove away, I saw him in my rearview mirror. Alan was at the hotel entrance, talking frantically on his phone, his face pale with fear. He had no idea what was coming for him, but he was about to find out. The drive to the ranch gave me too much time to think about how we got here. 25 miles of dark highway stretched out in front of me, and with every mile, the memories returned. Not the good ones of Avery's childhood, but the ones of the slow, calculated erosion of our relationship, orchestrated by Alan for the past 2 years. It started small, as these things always do. Subtle comments that seemed harmless at first. "Dad seems really tired lately, doesn't he?" Avery would say during our Sunday dinners. "Maybe he's working too hard at the ranch." At first, I thought it was genuine concern. At 68, my body didn't bounce back like it used to, and maintaining 800 acres of cattle was no easy task. But then the comments became more frequent, more pointed. "Alan thinks you should consider hiring more help," she mentioned one evening as we watched the sunset from the porch. "He's worried about you managing everything alone." Alan, who had never set foot on a ranch before he met my daughter. Alan, who wore designer suits to family barbecues and complained about the dust. Alan was worried about me. The real manipulation began about 18 months ago, right after Alan proposed. Suddenly, every conversation with Avery included his opinions, his concerns, his suggestions. He was always the sensible one, the practical one, the one looking out for everyone's best interests. Alan says it's not fair that I don't have any legal rights to the ranch, Avery told me one day, her tone measured. He says most fathers would have already started the transfer process. I remember the bitter taste of my coffee that morning and the tightness in my chest. Something I didn't have a name for yet. Transfer process? You know, putting the property in my name. For tax reasons. Alan researched it. He says we could save thousands in inheritance taxes if we plan ahead. Alan again. Always Alan with his research, his plans, his convenient solutions to problems I didn't even know I had. The hardest part was watching my daughter change. Avery had always been independent, with her mother's strong will. She'd worked on the ranch during summers, knew every fence line, every water tank. But slowly, Alan's voice started coming out of her mouth. "Dad, you're being stubborn about the ranch," she said during one particularly tense dinner. Alan just wants to help. He has experience in property management. Property management? As if the Double C Ranch was just some real estate investment. As if the land my grandfather homesteaded in 1923 was just an asset to be optimized. "What kind of experience?" I asked, though I already knew the answer would disappoint me. He manages several commercial properties in Dallas. He knows about land values, market trends, that sort of thing. That sort of thing. Not the kind that involves getting up at 4:30 a.m. to check on pregnant cows. Not the kind that requires mending fences in 100-degree heat or spending sleepless nights during a drought, praying the wells wouldn't run dry. The pressure ramped up after they got engaged. Alan started showing up uninvited, almost always when Avery wasn't there. He'd walk the property, phone in hand, taking pictures, asking questions about acreage and mineral rights. With that rehearsed smile, he'd say he was just curious, trying to understand Avery's roots. But it wasn't her family history he was calculating. One afternoon, I caught him by the barn, on the phone with someone, talking about comparative land values and potential development. When he saw me approach, he hung up immediately. "Work call," he said. "You know how it is. I didn't know how it was. I'd never made a business call on someone else's barn without permission." The lies started small. Alan would tell Avery I'd agreed to things I never consented to, that I'd said words I never spoke. "Dad told Alan he's ready to start handing over responsibilities," Avery mentioned one Sunday. "He's excited to have you take over more duties." I just stared at my daughter across the table, trying to see if she knew it wasn't true. But she believed him. She wanted to believe him. "When did I say that?" I asked cautiously. "Last week when you spoke near the south pasture. Alan said you seemed relieved to have someone to share the load with." I remembered that conversation. Alan had intercepted me while I was checking the fence line, asking me very direct questions about profit margins and operational costs. I gave him short answers and left as soon as I could. Apparently, he took my politeness as enthusiasm for his involvement. From there, the manipulation escalated. According to Alan, I was saying things I didn't remember, agreeing to decisions I never approved. Avery started looking at me with concern, as if I was suddenly becoming forgetful, unstable. "Are you feeling okay, Dad?" she asked one night, after Alan claimed I'd promised to show him the land surveys. "You seem a little confused lately." Confused. That's what Alan wanted her to think, that her father was losing his mind, that he was a burden, maybe even a risk to himself or others. But the truth was, I was more clear-headed than I had been in years. I started paying attention to every word Alan said, every claim, every story. I started taking notes, logging his lies, and I started making calls. The first was to my lawyer, James Mendoza, who had handled my affairs for 2 decades. "Has anyone contacted you about transferring the ranch property?" I asked. "No, Richard. Should they have?" Alan Renteria, Avery's fiancé, has been telling her that these transfers are common for tax reasons. There was a long silence. "Richard, you know the situation with the ranch. That's not entirely correct." I knew the situation. I had known it for 25 years. But Alan didn't know it, and neither did Avery. I had carried that secret since Mariana died, protecting my daughter from a truth that would only have complicated her life needlessly. "I think it's time to start making some calls, James." "Are you sure?" "Once we start this process, I will be. The second call was more complicated. Robert Carter had been my contact for 5 years. We spoke every quarter, and he handled the financial side of my position. He was surprised to hear from me outside our regular schedule. "Everything all right, Richard?" "I think the time has come to talk about the agreement," I said. "My daughter is marrying someone who doesn't understand the situation. That's a big decision. Are you completely sure?" I thought of Alan's hands on my daughter, his voice in her ear, whispering plans for land that wasn't mine to give. "I'm completely sure." The third call was the hardest. Dr. Patricia Wallace had been our family doctor for 15 years. She delivered Avery, held Mariana's hand through her cancer treatment, and sat with me through the darkest times. "Patricia, I need you to do something for me. I need a full medical evaluation, physical and cognitive." "Richard, you just had your annual checkup 3 months ago. Everything was perfect. I know. But I need official backup. A document certifying that I am in full possession of my mental faculties and in good physical condition." There was a pause. "Is someone suggesting otherwise?" I carefully told her what was happening, how Alan was trying to paint me as confused, forgetful, unable to manage my affairs, how Avery was starting to doubt me. "That son of a bitch," Patricia said, her anger showing. "Pardon my language, but that's emotional abuse. Textbook gaslighting. Can you help me?" "I'll do you one better. I'll run every test in the book. Blood work, cognitive tests, physical capability assessment. When we're done, you'll have a report that proves you're sharper than most 40-year-olds. The results were just as she predicted. Perfect blood pressure, excellent cognitive function, physical condition, far superior to the average for my age group. I put the medical reports in the safe, along with other documents that would soon become very important. But I made one mistake during those months of preparation. I underestimated how far Alan would go to get what he wanted. I thought he would keep up the slow pressure, wearing me down with patience. I thought he would continue his psychological campaign, slowly convincing Avery that her father was no longer reliable. I never imagined he would try to publicly humiliate me at his own wedding. I never thought he would go so far as to demand the ranch keys in front of 200 people. And I certainly never thought he would dare to hit me. That slap changed everything. It accelerated my plans by several months and forced my hand. Maybe it was for the best. Maybe it was time Alan understood that some secrets are worth keeping, and some lies have consequences he could never imagine. As I pulled onto the ranch road, I saw my phone light up with missed calls. Avery, probably. Alan, maybe. Certainly people who witnessed what happened at the reception and wanted to know what was next. But there was only one call I really wanted to make. I dialed Robert's number again, sitting in my truck, looking out at the land I had protected for 25 years. "Robert, it's Richard again. How soon can you get the board members to Dallas? If it's urgent, I can have them here by morning." I touched my swollen cheek, felt the ache in my hip where I'd hit the marble floor. "It's urgent. Alan Renteria just made the worst mistake of his life. It's time he learned who really owns the Double C Ranch. The truth about the ranch began 25 years ago, on the worst day of my life. Mariana had been fighting cancer for 18 months, and we had spent every last dime on treatments that ultimately failed to save her. I was sitting in the hospital billing office, looking at invoices that totaled over $300,000 when my ranch foreman found me. "Mr. Richard," he said, holding his hat in his hands, "I hate to bother you at a time like this, but we have a problem." The problem was the drought, the worst in 50 years. Our cattle were dying, the wells were dry, and we had no money to drill new ones. The bank was already circling, talking about foreclosure. Mariana was gone. Avery was only 7, and I was about to lose everything my family had built since 1923. That's when Robert Carter knocked on my door. I'll never forget that evening. I was on the porch, watching the sun set over land that might soon not be mine, when a black sedan pulled up the road. A man in an expensive suit got out, carrying a leather briefcase, with that confident look only people who manage a lot of money have. "Mr. Valverde, I'm Robert Carter. I represent the Meridian Investment Consortium. I understand you might be interested in a business arrangement. I didn't have the energy to be polite. If you're here to make a lowball offer for my ranch, let's not waste each other's time. Actually, he said, settling into the porch chair next to me without being asked, I'm here to offer you something very different. A chance to keep your ranch and solve your financial problems. Forever. He opened his briefcase and took out a thick contract. Meridian specializes in agricultural conservation. We buy ranches from families in crisis, then lease them back to the original owners to manage. You keep your home, your job, your legacy. We handle the finances. I was doubtful. Where's the catch? No catch. You become the manager of our ranch. We pay you a generous salary, cover all operational expenses, and handle improvements and expansions. From the outside, everything looks the same. You'll still be Mr. Richard Valverde, running the Valverde Ranch. But legally, the property will belong to Meridian. For how long? As long as you want. As long as you wish to maintain the agreement. When you decide to retire, we'll work out a transition plan. If you ever want to buy the property back, we'll negotiate fair terms based on the market value at that time. I stared at the contract, my head spinning. Why would you do this? What do you get out of it? Robert smiled. Meridian isn't just any investment group, Mr. Valverde. We represent very wealthy individuals who believe in preserving America's agricultural heritage. They don't need immediate profits. They think long-term. Who are these people? That's confidential. But I can tell you they are patriots, who understand that family ranches like yours are the backbone of this country. They'd rather see them preserved and well-managed than broken up and sold to developers. The offer seemed too good to be true. A salary of $60,000 a year, plus full benefits. All ranch expenses covered. Complete autonomy in day-to-day operations. And most importantly, Avery would inherit my position when I was gone, with the option to eventually buy the land. I need to think about it, of course. But Mr. Valverde, the bank is planning to start foreclosure proceedings next week. This offer expires in 48 hours. I signed the contract that night. What other choice did I have? I was drowning, and Meridian threw me a life raft. The next morning, trucks with drilling equipment arrived. Within a week, we had 3 new wells pumping clean water. Within a month, the cattle were healthy again. And within 6 months, the ranch was turning a better profit than it ever had under my ownership. For 25 years, the agreement worked perfectly. Meridian sent quarterly checks, covered all major expenses, and never interfered with my decisions. Robert came by 4 times a year, always cordial and supportive. I was the manager, but to everyone else, I was still the owner. Even Avery believed the ranch belonged to me. I planned to tell her the truth when she turned 21, but by then she was in college, focused on her studies and social life. When she graduated, she moved to Dallas for her career. The ranch wasn't part of her immediate plans, so I kept putting off the conversation. Then Alan came along, and everything changed. The first time he set foot on the ranch, he walked around like he was doing an appraisal. He asked direct questions about the land size, the mineral rights, the property value. He wanted to see the property records, the tax assessments, the profit reports. Just trying to understand Avery's heritage, he explained, when I caught him taking pictures of the equipment, but his questions were too precise, too meticulous. It wasn't just curiosity about Avery's future. He was planning something. That same week, I called Robert. We have a potential problem. What kind of problem? Avery's boyfriend is asking a lot of questions about the ranch. He wants information I can't give him without revealing the agreement. How serious are they? Serious enough that he's talking about marriage. There was a long pause. Richard, you know the terms of the contract. If anyone outside the family finds out about the true ownership structure, Meridian has the right to terminate the agreement immediately. I knew. I had read that clause dozens of times over the years. It was Meridian's way of protecting themselves from public scandals or legal messes. If it ever got out that wealthy investors were secretly buying up family ranches, it would create a political problem they wanted to avoid at all costs. What are my options? Tell your daughter the truth. If she's planning to marry this man, She needs to know what she's really inheriting. But every time I tried to talk to Avery, Alan managed to steer the conversation, ask his own questions, draw his own conclusions. He assumed the ranch was a valuable property that would one day belong to Avery. He assumed I was a wealthy landowner who could afford to be generous with wedding gifts and financial support. He had no idea I was little more than a well-paid manager, looking after someone else's investment. The pressure increased when they got engaged. Alan started talking about the improvements he wanted to make, the changes he envisioned for the property. He talked about subdividing the pastures, building recreational facilities, even selling off lots for residential development. "This place has incredible potential," he told me one afternoon, standing on the hill overlooking the main house. "With the right marketing strategy, we could turn this into a tourist ranch, a wedding venue, corporate retreats, that sort of thing." My blood ran cold. The contract with Meridian explicitly forbade any commercial development without board approval. Alan was planning to turn a working cattle ranch into a tourist trap. "That's not really my vision for this place," I replied cautiously. "Well, it won't be your decision for much longer, will it?" He smiled, but his voice had an edge. "Once Avery and I are married, we'll be the ones making the decisions." That's when I understood. Alan wasn't just planning to inherit the ranch. He was planning to take it over while I was still breathing. He was maneuvering to push me out, to convince Avery that I was too old and stubborn to manage the property effectively. I started documenting everything, every conversation, every demand, every lie he told Avery about things I had supposedly agreed to. I also started preparing for the confrontation I knew was coming. The medical evaluation was just the first step. I had my lawyer pull a full background check on Alan Renteria, his credit history, his business dealings, his past relationships. What we found was disturbing. Alan had a pattern of targeting women with assets. His first marriage ended when his wife discovered he had been secretly mortgaging the property she had inherited. His business partnerships always failed, leaving his partners with the debts while he walked away. But the most damaging information came from his current job. Alan was under investigation for filing questionable expense reports and using company resources without authorization. He was likely going to be fired within the next 6 months. He was desperate, and desperate men do dangerous things. I should have told Avery everything before the wedding. I should have sat her down and explained it all, from the Meridian contract to Alan's financial troubles. But I kept hoping she would see his manipulations for herself. I kept believing that my smart, independent daughter would see what was happening. Instead, Alan pushed it to the extreme, with public humiliation and physical violence. He forced my hand in the worst possible way, in front of the worst possible audience. Now, sitting in my truck at the ranch entrance, I knew there was no going back. Tomorrow morning, Robert would arrive with the Meridian board members. Alan would find out that he had just assaulted the manager of a ranch, owned by very powerful people. People who didn't tolerate threats against their investments or attacks on their staff. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Alan's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. "Richard, look, I know things got out of hand tonight. I was stressed, maybe had too much champagne. But we're family now, and family solves its problems. Call me. We need to talk about how to move forward. Move forward." As if slapping me in front of 200 guests was just a minor bump in our relationship. As if tomorrow everything would go on as usual. Alan had no idea what was coming. But in about 12 hours, he was going to get a lesson on the difference between appearing to own something and actually owning it. And more importantly, he was going to learn that some people have friends in very high places. I was up before dawn, just like always. But this morning, everything felt different. Every sound was sharper. The coffee pot gurgling in the background. My boots echoing on the hardwood floors. The distant lowing of cattle in the east pasture. Today was the day Alan Renteria was going to find out that some secrets have consequences. Robert called at 6:15. We're an hour out from the ranch. The board members flew in from Houston, Austin, and San Antonio. They weren't happy about being pulled from their commitments. But when I explained what happened, they agreed it required immediate attention. How much should I tell them about Alan? Everything. They need to understand exactly what kind of threat we're dealing with. I spent the next hour getting ready. I gathered all my documentation, the medical reports proving my competency, the background check on Alan's character and financial situation, the recordings of our conversations over the past year. Everything needed to show a complete picture of what had been happening. At 7:30, 3 black SUVs drove up the ranch road, kicking up dust in the morning sun. I watched from the kitchen window as 6 people got out, all dressed in formal attire that looked out of place against the backdrop of pastures and mesquite trees. Robert was in the lead, looking the same as he did 25 years ago. Beside him walked a woman in her 60 seconds, with silver hair and a presence that said she was used to being the smartest person in the room. The others were men in their 50 seconds and 60 seconds, with the quiet confidence that only comes from real power. "Richard," Robert said as he approached, "I'd like to introduce you to the Meridian Board. Mrs. Caroline Cardenas, our president. James Mendoza, chief financial officer. David Aguilar, legal counsel. Thomas Duarte, director of operations. And Patricia Vasquez, risk management." I shook their hands one by one, noting their firm grips and direct gazes. These were not people who wasted time on formalities. "Mr. Valverde," Mrs. Cardenas said, her voice crisp and professional, "Robert has explained the situation. We understand you've been threatened and physically assaulted by someone attempting to take this property." "That's correct. And this person believes you are the sole owner of the ranch?" "Yes. He believes it, and so does my daughter. I've maintained that cover for 25 years, as required by the contract." David Aguilar opened his briefcase and took out a tablet. "We've been looking into Alan Renteria since Robert's call yesterday. What we found is disturbing." He turned the tablet toward me, showing a detailed financial profile. "Mr. Renteria is in significant debt. Credit cards, personal loans, and apparently gambling debts to some unsavory people. He owes about $150,000 to various creditors." Mrs. Cardenas took over. "More troubling is his employment situation. Our contacts at his company confirmed he's under investigation for embezzlement. He's been using corporate credit cards for personal expenses and billing clients for work that was never done. They're planning to fire him next week," Patricia Vasquez added. "He probably suspects it, which explains his desperation to secure assets through marriage." I felt a sick knot in my stomach. "Does Avery know any of this?" "We doubt it," said Thomas Duarte. "Renteria has been very careful to project an image of success. Fancy car, nice apartment, designer clothes, all bought on credit he can't afford." James Mendoza consulted his own tablet. "The psychological profile is a perfect match for a predator. He targets women with assets, uses manipulation and emotional abuse to gain control, and then systematically strips them of their wealth. His first wife lost her family's jewelry business because of his debts," David Aguilar continued. "His second serious relationship ended when the woman discovered he'd forged her signature on loan documents, using her house as collateral. The picture was becoming clearer and uglier. Alan wasn't just an opportunist. He was a professional con artist who had found the perfect victim in my trusting daughter." "What's our legal position if he continues to claim the property?" I asked. David Aguilar smiled coldly. "Non-existent. He has no claim. The property belongs to Meridian, operated under a management contract with you. Even if he were legally married to your daughter, even if you wanted to transfer your management rights to them, it would require the approval of this board, which he will never get," Mrs. Cardenas said firmly. "More importantly," Patricia Vasquez added, "his assault on you last night was witnessed by over 200 people. We already have statements from 6 witnesses who have contacted our legal team. Mr. Renteria committed felony assault against a Meridian employee in the performance of his duties." I blinked. "Felony?" "Assault on a person over 65 is automatically a felony in the state of Texas," David Aguilar explained. "And since you were acting as our representative, it also counts as assault on a corporate officer. Mr. Renteria is facing serious prison time." My phone rang, interrupting the conversation. Alan's name flashed on the screen. Mrs. Cardenas motioned for me to answer, while David Aguilar activated a recording app on his tablet. "Alan. Richard. Thank God. Look, I've been thinking about last night, and I realize I owe you a huge apology. I was out of line. The stress of the wedding, the champagne, You know how it is, do I? Come on, don't be like that. We're family now. Family forgives and moves on. I was thinking, we should meet this morning. Settle the details of the property transfer. Get this ranch business sorted out so there are no more misunderstandings. I looked at Mrs. Cardenas, who nodded for me to continue. Property transfer? Don't play dumb, Richard. You know exactly what I mean. Avery is entitled to her inheritance. And frankly, after last night, it's clear you're not in a position to manage the ranch anymore. You lost control over a simple business conversation. His audacity was stunning. He was trying to rewrite history, as if I had been the one who was violent. Really, Alan? You're going to try and say I hit you? I'm trying to be civil. Look, we all saw what happened. You got agitated. You tried to swing at me. You lost your balance and fell. It was humiliating for everyone, especially Avery. Patricia Vasquez was scribbling furiously on a notepad, while David Aguilar made sure the recording was clear. So, you want me to sign the ranch over to you and Avery? It's the right thing to do, Richard. And honestly, it's what Avery wants. She's been telling me for months how worried she is about you, out here all alone, trying to manage everything. She'll be much more at peace knowing the property is in responsible hands. Responsible hands, meaning yours. I know you don't like me, but I'm not going anywhere. Avery and I are married. I'm going to be part of this family for the rest of your life. We can do this the easy way, or the hard way. There it was, the threat, spoken with the same calculated confidence that had fooled my daughter for 2 years. And what's the hard way, Alan? The hard way is lawyers, and doctors, and competency hearings. The hard way is Avery having to make difficult decisions about her father's mental health. The hard way is all of us ending up embarrassed. Mrs. Cardenas's face hardened. She motioned for me to let him talk. And if I sign, all of that goes away? It all goes away. We have a quiet family dinner. We put last night behind us and start fresh. I'm even willing to let you stay on as a sort of advisor. You could keep living in the house, help with the day-to-day. Think of it as a comfortable retirement. His condescending tone was unbearable. He was offering to let me stay in my own home, as his employee, managing the property he thought he was stealing. I need to think about it. Don't take too long, Richard. I've got lawyers ready, and Avery is getting more worried about you by the hour. She's been crying all night, asking if her father is going crazy. He hung up before I could say anything. I put the phone down and looked at the faces around me. 5 of the most powerful people I'd ever met, and all of them were furious. Textbook elder abuse, Patricia Vasquez said. Isolation, psychological manipulation, financial exploitation, and threats of institutionalization. It's all there. The recording is enough to file criminal charges, David Aguilar added. Extortion, attempted fraud, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. Mrs. Cardenas stood up. Mr. Valverde, I want you to call Mr. Renteria back. Tell him you've decided to agree to his terms, but you need to see him in person to sign the papers. Tell him to come to the ranch this afternoon. You want him to come here? Absolutely. We have some business to discuss with Mr. Renteria. It's time he found out exactly who he's been threatening. Thomas Duarte looked at his watch. I'll call our security team. They can be here in 2 hours. Security team? Robert smiled grimly. Meridian protects its investments, Richard, and more importantly, we protect our people. Mr. Renteria assaulted one of our employees and tried to defraud one of our properties. That warrants a response. I thought of Avery, probably alone in a hotel room right now, confused and heartbroken, believing her father was somehow to blame for her wedding disaster. I thought of all the lies Alan had told her, how he had twisted her love for me into doubt and worry. What about my daughter? She doesn't know any of this. She will, Mrs. Cardenas said firmly. After we're finished with Mr. Renteria, we will sit down with your daughter, and we will explain everything. The truth about the ranch, the truth about her husband, and the truth about what he's been doing to both of you. My phone buzzed with a text from Alan. Noon at the ranch. Bring the deed and any other paperwork. Time to make it official. I showed the message to Mrs. Cardenas. She smiled without a trace of warmth. Perfect. Mr. Renteria wants to make it official. We'll be happy to accommodate him. Alan arrived at the ranch 15 minutes early, driving his rented BMW like he owned the place. I watched from the kitchen window as he parked near the porch, adjusting his tie and checking his reflection in the side mirror. He had no idea that 6 of the most powerful people in Texas were watching him from the barn, where they had set up a direct view of the house. Meridian's security team had arrived an hour earlier, 3 former federal agents who now handled delicate situations for the consortium. They were positioned around the property, invisible but ready. Mrs. Cardenas had been very clear in her instructions. Observe, record, and only intervene if Alan becomes violent. Remember, she told me before taking her place in the barn, let him talk. Let him make his demands. Give him enough rope to hang himself. I opened the front door before Alan could knock. He walked in with that arrogant stride of his, carrying a leather briefcase and an expression of barely contained triumph. "Richard," he said, not bothering to shake my hand, "I'm glad you came to your senses. This is what's best for everyone." "Is it?" "Of course. Avery is relieved that we're finally going to resolve this. She was so worried about you after last night." He placed his briefcase on the dining room table and snapped it open. I brought all the necessary documents. The deed transfer, power of attorney, everything needed to make it official. I stared at the papers he was spreading out on my grandmother's table. Legal documents he had clearly prepared in advance, probably weeks ago. This wasn't an impulsive decision born of stress and champagne. This was a carefully orchestrated operation. "You've been planning this for a while." Alan looked up, surprised by the comment. For an instant his mask slipped and I saw the calculation in his eyes. Then he forced a smile. "Well, I'm a businessman, Richard. I believe in being prepared. After I got engaged to Avery, I started thinking about family assets, estate planning, that sort of thing. I'm just trying to be responsible." Responsible. I sat down across from him, aware of the small recording device David Aguilar had given me, tucked into my shirt pocket. "Tell me about responsibility, Alan. Tell me about your responsibilities at your company." His hand paused over the papers. "What?" "Your job, Alan. The one you're about to lose for embezzlement." His face lost its color. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do. Corporate cards used for personal expenses. Billing clients for work you never performed. Your bosses are planning to fire you next week. They'll probably press charges, too." Alan's eyes darted to the windows, as if suddenly realizing we might not be alone. "Who told you that? Does it matter?" "What matters is that Avery doesn't know, does she? She doesn't know about the gambling debts, or the credit card bills, or the fact that you owe a lot of money to some very dangerous people." He stood up abruptly, scraping his chair on the wooden floor. "You've been investigating me? I've been protecting my daughter? The same daughter you've been systematically gaslighting for 2 years?" His voice rose with fake indignation. "I love Avery. Everything I've done has been for her, for our future together. Everything you've done has been for you. You saw a lonely woman with a father who owned property, and you saw an opportunity." Alan's composure completely crumbled. "Father with property? You think you're rich? This place is mortgaged to the hilt, Richard. I've seen the financials. You're barely breaking even on this cattle operation. The only real asset you have is the land itself." There it was. The confession that he had been digging into my finances, with the intent to liquidate everything I'd built. Keeping my voice steady, I said, "So it's the land you want." "I want security for my wife. Avery deserves better than to live worrying if her aging father can keep this place afloat." He leaned forward, his tone that condescending one I hated. "Look, I know you're proud. I know this ranch means a lot to you, but you have to be realistic. You're 68 years old. You've got no help, and this place is barely making a profit. Sell it to a developer, invest the money, and everyone wins." "Everyone wins?" "You get to retire comfortably. Avery gets her inheritance while she's still young enough to enjoy it, and I get to take care of both of you, like family should." "Like family should?" says the man who just admitted he wants to sell my grandfather's ranch to developers. "What kind of developer did you have in mind?" Alan's eyes lit up. He pulled out his phone and started swiping. "I've already had some preliminary talks. There's a firm in Dallas that specializes in luxury residential communities. They're very interested in this area. He turned the phone toward me, showing architectural mock-ups of a gated community called Ranch View Estates. 200 homes, a golf course, and a shopping center, all built on what used to be the Double C Ranch. They're offering $4.8 million for the full 800 acres, Alan continued. Can you imagine, Richard? $4.8 million. You'd never have to worry about money again. I looked at the plans, feeling sick. You've already negotiated a price? Just preliminary talks. I told them I had to talk to the family first. But yes, they're very interested. They want to break ground in the spring. And you get a commission for this sale? Alan hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. Well, there would be a finder's fee. Standard for these transactions. How much? 2%. $200,000. He said it quickly, as if the number didn't matter. But I'm not doing it for that, Richard. This is for the family. $200,000. More than enough to pay off his gambling debts and credit cards, with plenty left over to start fresh somewhere else. Probably without Avery, once she had served her purpose. And what does Avery think about turning her childhood home into a subdivision? Avery wants what's best for you. She trusts me to handle the financial side of things. Because you convinced her I'm not capable. Alan's mask cracked for a second, showing a flash of annoyance. Because you're acting incapable. This ranch is a lost cause, and you're too stubborn to see it. How long do you think you can keep this up? 5 more years? 10? What happens when you have a heart attack out here all alone, or fall off a horse and break your hip? He was working himself up now, believing his own excuses. Avery is going to inherit this place when you die anyway. I'm just making sure she inherits something of value, instead of debt and crumbling buildings. What I'm considering is on your behalf. It is, and it's also realistic. But you can't see past your own pride to do what's right for your daughter. That's when I heard car doors slamming outside. Alan heard it too and moved to the window. "Who's that?" he asked, his voice tense. I came up beside him. Mrs. Caroline Cardenas was walking toward the house, flanked by David Aguilar and Thomas Duarte. Behind them, Robert and the other board members followed. All 6 of them had faces so cold they could freeze water. "Those are the people who actually own this ranch," I said quietly. Alan spun around to look at me. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that I don't own the Double C Ranch, Alan. I never have. I'm the manager. I work for them." The briefcase fell from Alan's hand, legal documents scattering across the floor. "That's impossible. I was facing bankruptcy 25 years ago. These people bought the ranch and hired me to manage it. Everything you've seen, everything you've planned for, everything you've threatened me over, none of it belongs to me." Alan's face went through a series of expressions. Confusion, disbelief, and finally, dawning comprehension. "You're lying. I wish I were. But the people walking up to my door represent a consortium worth about $2 billion. They own ranches, farms, and agricultural land in 6 states. And you just spent the last year trying to scam them." The knock on the door came right on cue. I opened it to find Mrs. Cardenas and her team waiting on the porch. "Mr. Valverde," she said formally, "thank you for calling us. I believe there's someone here who wants to discuss a property transaction." Alan was backing away toward the far wall, his eyes wide with panic. "This is a setup." "No, Alan," I said sadly. "This is reality, the one you've been avoiding for a long time." Mrs. Cardenas swept into the room, her presence dominating it. "Mr. Renteria, I presume." "I am Caroline Cardenas, president of the Meridian Investment Consortium. I understand you've been asking questions about our property." "Your property?" "The Double C Ranch. 800 acres of prime Texas cattle land, acquired by Meridian in 1998. Mr. Valverde is our ranch manager, and a very good one." David Aguilar opened his own briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "We have transcripts of your conversation this morning, Mr. Renteria. Extortion, attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit elder abuse. Quite an impressive list of felonies." Alan looked around the room, desperately searching for an escape. "You can't prove anything." Thomas Duarte held up a small digital recorder. "Actually, we can. Every word, recorded with Mr. Valverde's full cooperation. We also have witness statements from your wedding reception," Patricia Vasquez added, stepping inside with the others. Felony assault on a senior citizen, in front of 200 witnesses. The district attorney is very interested in pressing charges. Alan's legs seemed to give out. He slumped into a chair, his head in his hands. This can't be happening. Oh, but it is, Mrs. Cardenas said coolly. You see, Mr. Renteria, at Meridian, we protect our investments. More importantly, we protect our people. Mr. Valverde has been with us for 25 years. You threaten him. You threaten all of us. What do you want? Alan's voice was barely a whisper. We want you to disappear, she said coldly. Forever. From Mr. Valverde's life. From this property. And, if you're smart, from the state of Texas. David Aguilar placed a document on the table. This is a restraining order, effective immediately. You are prohibited from contacting Mr. Valverde, his daughter, or anyone associated with this property. If you violate it, you will be arrested on the spot. You can't do this. Avery is my wife. Actually, Patricia Vasquez said, checking her tablet, that marriage may not be valid. Our investigation turned up some interesting data about your previous relationships. There's evidence to suggest you were never legally divorced from your first wife. Alan's face went white. That's impossible. Oh, yes. We'll let the authorities sort that out. In the meantime, you have exactly 1 hour to pack your things and leave the state. Mrs. Cardenas stepped closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Mr. Renteria, you are a pathetic little man who preys on vulnerable women. You are exactly the kind of predator we have spent 25 years keeping off properties like this. She straightened up, her voice firm again. You will not contact Avery again. You will not attempt to claim any property or assets. You will disappear quietly, or we will destroy you. Is that clear? Alan nodded desperately, then looked at me, pleading. Richard, please. I made mistakes, but I really do love Avery. I looked him straight in the eye. If you loved my daughter, you never would have tried to steal her heritage. You never would have lied to her about me, and you certainly never would have hit me at her wedding. The security team appeared in the doorway. 3 large men who made the room feel smaller. Time to go, Mr. Renteria, one of them said politely. Alan gathered his scattered papers with trembling hands, stuffed them into his briefcase, and walked to the door. At the threshold, he turned one last time. This isn't over. Mrs. Cardenas smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Oh, Mr. Renteria, this is most definitely over. The silence after he left was absolute. I stood on the porch, watching the dust from his BMW settle on the ranch road, knowing I would never see him again. The Meridian board members were in my living room, quietly packing their documents, and preparing for what would be the hardest conversation of my life. Mr. Valverde, Mrs. Cardenas said softly, we need to talk about your daughter, Avery. Sweet, trusting Avery, probably in a hotel room right now, wondering why her wedding ended in disaster, and why her new husband had suddenly disappeared. She had no idea her marriage was likely invalid, that Alan had been planning to steal her inheritance, or that everything she believed about her family was built on a 5-year-old lie. She's going to hate me, I said quietly. Robert shook his head. She's going to be hurt and confused, but she's also going to be relieved when she understands what Alan was really planning. David Aguilar looked up from his tablet. We've located her. She's at the Four Seasons downtown. Our investigators spoke with the hotel staff. She's been in her room since last night, not taking calls from anyone except Alan, who stopped calling an hour ago, Patricia Vasquez added pointedly. Mrs. Cardenas made a decision. We'll go to her together, all of us. She needs to hear the truth from you, but she also needs to understand the full picture. An hour later, we were sitting in a private conference room at the hotel. Avery arrived looking exhausted and bewildered, still wearing her wedding dress from the day before, her eyes red from crying. When she saw me with 6 strangers in business suits, her confusion grew. Dad, what's going on? Where's Alan? He was supposed to meet me here hours ago, but he's not answering his phone. I guided her to a chair, my heart breaking at the trust still shining in her eyes. Honey, we need to talk. There are things you need to know. Is this about last night? About what happened at the reception? She looked around the room nervously. Dad, I know Alan shouldn't have. I know he lost his temper. But you were being so stubborn about the ranch, and he's been under so much pressure. Avery, my voice was firmer than I intended. Alan hit me. He assaulted me in front of 200 people, because I refused to give him something that was never mine to give. Never yours to give? Dad, what are you talking about? Mrs. Cardenas leaned forward. Miss Renteria. Valverde. Avery corrected automatically. I'm keeping my name, Miss Valverde. I am Caroline Cardenas. I represent the Meridian Investment Consortium. We are the owners of the Double C Ranch. The words hung in the air, heavy and solid. Avery blinked several times, as if she hadn't heard correctly. You're the owners? That can't be. The ranch has been in our family for generations. It was in your family, Robert explained gently, until 25 years ago, when your father was facing bankruptcy from your mother's medical bills. Meridian purchased the property and hired your father as the ranch manager. I watched my daughter's face as the implications began to sink in. Ranch manager? I'm an employee, honey. A well-paid, well-treated employee. But an employee nonetheless. I never owned the land. I never had the right to transfer it to you or to anyone else. Avery's breathing became shallow. But you always talked about it being my inheritance. You always said the ranch would be mine one day. And it could be, Mrs. Cardenas said. Meridian has always been willing to sell the property back to the Valverde family if they ever had the means to buy it. And how much would that cost? David Aguilar checked his tablet. The current market value is approximately $4.2 million. That number hit Avery like a physical blow. She sank back into her chair, her gaze distant. 4.2 million, she repeated. Alan thought. Alan thought he was marrying rich, Thomas Duarte said bluntly. He spent 2 years planning to get his hands on what he thought was your inheritance. Patricia Vasquez opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Miss Valverde, we need you to understand who you married. Alan Renteria is a con artist who follows a pattern. He targets women with assets. For the next 30 minutes, they laid it all out. Alan's debts, his work problems, his history of financial fraud. They showed her call recordings, evidence of his manipulation, and documents proving he planned to sell the ranch to developers. But the worst part came at the end. There are also indications that your marriage may not be legal, David Aguilar said gently. It appears Alan never properly divorced his first wife. Avery made a small, wounded sound. He's married? To someone else? He was married. The first wife has been missing for 3 years. The investigation is ongoing. My daughter doubled over as if she'd been punched in the stomach. I moved to hold her, but she put a hand up. No, she whispered. Just. No. We sat in silence for several minutes. Outside, the sounds of traffic drifted up, the city going about its business, while my daughter's world fell apart in a hotel conference room. Finally, she looked at me, her eyes filled with a new kind of pain. Did you know? About Alan, did you know what he was? I suspected. I tried to investigate, but I didn't have proof until recently. Why didn't you tell me? It was the question I had been dreading. Because I was hoping you would see him for who he really was. Because I didn't want to be the father who ruins his daughter's happiness, based on suspicions. And because you were afraid I wouldn't believe you, she said softly. I nodded. He was very good at making me seem like the problem, at making you doubt my judgment. My Avery was quiet for a long time, processing everything. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, but distant. I need time. I need to think about all this. Mrs. Cardenas stood. Of course. Take all the time you need. Mr. Valverde's position at the ranch is secure for as long as he wants it. And if you ever decide to discuss purchasing the property, we are always open to negotiating with the Valverde family. After they left, Avery and I were alone in the meeting room. The silence between us was thick, heavy with 25 years of secrets and 2 years of manipulation. I feel so stupid, she finally said. You're not stupid. You're trusting. There's a difference. Is there? I let a stranger convince me that my own father was losing his mind. I believed Alan when he said you were getting forgetful, unstable. I even started researching nursing homes, Dad. I was planning to have you declared legally incompetent. That confession hurt more than Alan's slap. Honey, no. Let me finish. I let him poison my relationship with you. I let him make me doubt everything I knew about the man who raised me, who broke his back to give me a good life after Mom died. The tears were flowing freely now. And all for what? For a man who only saw me as a way to steal money. I took her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. Alan was a professional. He knew exactly how to manipulate us both. But I should have known. I should have trusted you. We just sat there holding hands as she cried. Both of us, mourning different things. She was mourning her broken marriage, her lost trust, her betrayed judgment. I was mourning the relationship we had lost to Alan's lies, and the innocence she would never get back. 3 months later, Avery came back to the ranch. Not permanently, but for a long stay, while she sorted out the legal mess of her invalid marriage and rebuilt her life. The annulment was surprisingly easy once Alan's bigamy was confirmed. He never contested anything, probably because he was too busy dodging creditors and the law. We never heard from him again. The last report from Meridian's investigators placed him in Mexico, apparently trying to start over with a new identity. I hoped he had learned something from the experience, but I doubted it. Men like Alan Renteria rarely change. The ranch felt different with Avery there. She threw herself into the work with the intensity of someone trying to escape her own thoughts. She learned to mend fences, helped with cattle vaccinations, and took over the bookkeeping with an efficiency that impressed even Mrs. Cardenas during her quarterly visits. "Your daughter has a real head for the business," Mrs. Cardenas told me one afternoon as we watched Avery negotiate with a cattle buyer, "if she ever wants to make an offer on the property. I think the board would be very willing to listen, but the money wasn't the issue." Avery's trust fund from her mother's life insurance, combined with her own savings and earning potential, was enough to cover a down payment. The real question was whether she wanted to be tied to this place, to this life, after everything that had happened. The answer came on a quiet Sunday evening in December. We were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, when she finally brought it up. "I want to buy the ranch," she said. "Just like that. Are you sure? You don't have to feel obligated." "I'm not. I'm doing it because this is my home. Because this is where Mom and I picked wildflowers every spring. Because this is where I learned to ride with you. Because this is where I understood what real love is." She paused, her voice softer. "Alan made me forget who I was, where I came from. He made me feel ashamed of this place, of our simple life. But there's nothing simple about what you built here, Dad. There's nothing shameful about honest work and taking care of the land." 6 months later, the transfer was complete. Avery Valverde became the official owner of the Double C Ranch, with a mortgage she could comfortably afford, and a father who stayed on as her ranch manager. "Though now," I answered to her, "not to Meridian." Mrs. Cardenas came to the closing, bringing champagne and an unexpected gift. 25 years ago, Meridian bought this ranch to preserve it," she said, raising her glass. "Today, we return it to the family who loves it most. This is exactly what we hoped for when we met your father, watching Avery sign the papers that made her the owner. I felt a peace I hadn't known since Mariana died. My daughter was home. She was safe, and she was in control of her own destiny. Alan Renteria was just a bad memory, fading more each day." That night, as we walked the fence line together, checking for damage from a recent storm, Avery asked the question I'd been expecting. "Do you ever regret it? Hiding the truth about Meridian for so long?" I took a moment to answer. "I regret that it made you vulnerable to Alan's manipulation, that it complicated your relationship with the ranch. But I don't regret protecting you from financial worries when you were a child. And I don't regret working with people who valued preserving this land over making a quick profit." She nodded, and then surprised me with what she said next. "I've been thinking about Mom lately, what she would say about all this. What do you think she'd say?" Avery smiled, a genuine, happy smile I hadn't seen in months. "I think she'd say that family protects each other no matter what, and that a home isn't defined by who holds the deed, but by who belongs there." As we walked back to the house, I realized that Alan Renteria in his own twisted way, had given us a gift. By trying to tear us apart, he forced us to rebuild on a foundation of truth instead of secrets. We were stronger now, more honest with each other, more aware of what we had. The ranch lights glowed warm and welcoming as we approached. In the distance, the cattle settled in for the night, and the land stretched out around us, familiar and comforting. Ours again, in the way that mattered most. I was finally free from the weight of my secrets, and my daughter was finally free from the influence of a man who never deserved her trust. It wasn't the ending we planned, but it was the one we needed. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply outliving the people who try to destroy you. Sometimes, the greatest victory is finding peace with the truth, however complicated it may be. Now I'm curious about you, who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Has anything like this ever happened to you? Comment below. And in the meantime, I'm leaving 2 more favorite stories from the channel on the end screen that I'm sure will surprise you. Thanks for watching until the end.